All right. I think as folks continue to trickle in, we can get started. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Alicia West, and I'm the Director of Public Design Outreach for DEP. This is our third in a series of public engagement meetings we're hosting about the design of the Gowanus CSO facility project. And we're really thrilled to see such a good turnout tonight. Thank you all for being here. Okay, so first, a little bit of Zoom housekeeping. Kevin, if you can go to the next slide. So the meeting is being recorded, which you all should have gotten a little Zoom voice in your speakers telling you that. And it's going to be available on our YouTube channel after the meeting. So please mute yourself while others are speaking. The chat is active and we're going to do our best to monitor it during the meeting, but it will also be saved and reviewed by the team after the meeting. So you'll see the chat feature is the little speech bubble at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So throughout the meeting, we're going to have some polls, some to help us gauge everyone's familiarity with the project and to help guide the character of the design of the site. We're also going to have some opportunities for question and answer and discussion. So again, I always say this, we're really hopeful that everyone can keep their comments respectful and listen to each other. We're really excited to share where we're at and to hear your thoughts. So we'll do a little intros. Kevin, next slide. There we go. So we have a wonderful team of design professionals working on this project. And if you attended the last meetings, these faces will be familiar to you. Many of you know me and Kevin Clark, DEP's portfolio manager for the Gowanus Superfund projects. Our consultant team is listed on the right side of the slide. And tonight you're going to hear from and work with members of our architecture and landscape architecture teams, Seldorf and Scape. Anna Holkalter, Gina Worth, and Kevin Keating will introduce themselves soon. We're also joined tonight by Elizabeth Ernish from the Parks Department. Thank you, Elizabeth, for being here. Okay, next slide. Great, so our agenda. We're gonna kick off the evening with a presentation to make sure everyone has the basics about the project goals and the timeline, and then we'll present updates to the completed salt shed design and the conceptual level designs for the CSO facilities head house. Then we're going to recap the public open space programming and conceptual layout we presented in May and report back on what we heard during those May workshops. So we'll have some polling and discussions to help our designers continue to make sure that the community's vision is really incorporated into the Superfund project. I want to say upfront that we've still got a lot of work to do on the open space and that requires some really in-depth coordination with stakeholders and our agency partners and of course the EPA. And that process is ongoing and we expect to have more progress to share in the new year. So now it's time for our first poll. Exciting, and I'm going to do this. Hopefully I can do this correctly. All right. So how many of the previous meetings did you attend? You should all get a little pop-up screen now to fill in. None, 1, 2. Okay, everybody take another minute and put your answer in. All right, last chance. I'm going to end the poll. Okay. All right, so we have some people who haven't joined us before, people who've been to 1 meeting, people who've been to 2 meetings, people who've been to 2 meetings. Wow, very impressed. So it's pretty much an even split across the board. So we've got, for those of you who are just joining us, we're going to do a good recap. So we'll bring you up to speed. Okay. And the next poll, question number 2. All right, and this really helps us understand how our outreach is working. So this might be a boring question for you, but it helps me know that I'm reaching you one way or the other. So you can, I think this should be multiple choice, so you can click as many of these as makes sense for you. Okay, 79% of you have answered this question. Keep going. All right, got 74%. I think that's better than most voting turnout. So I'm going to end the poll. All right. All right, this is really helpful. And also just want to give a big shout out to GCC for really sharing out on multiple media about the meeting tonight. I really appreciate it. Okay. All right, moving on from polls. All right, I'm going to hand things over to Kevin Clark, who's our portfolio manager, to do a brief overview about how this project came to be, our goals and timeline. And you will hear from me again in a little bit, but Kevin's going to take over now. Take it away, Kevin.
Thank you, Alicia. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. Next slide, please. Oh. So I know that a lot of people that are attending tonight are already familiar with this background, but for anybody that's new in the room, we just want to quickly go through some background here. So in 2010, the US EPA designated the Gowanus Canal a Superfund site and identified a number of potential responsible parties, including New York City and National Grid. As part of that, the EPA has required the city to remediate petroleum-based contaminants at the canal, and very specifically to reduce combined sewer overflow discharges to the canal. And to that end, DEP will construct 2 combined sewer overflow facilities. And the one at this site is intended to store as much as 4 million gallons of combined sewage until it can be stored and pumped back to the treatment plant, the Owl's Head Wastewater Resource Recovery Facility in Bay Ridge for treatment. And while satisfying this EPA mandate, this project does provide a unique opportunity for us to provide some meaningful open space to the community. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight. Next slide, please. So what is a CSO? Once again, a lot of you in the room might be familiar with this slide, but New York City's sewer system is approximately 60% combined, which means it is used to convey both sanitary flow, so flow from your toilet or shower, for example, and also storm flows from the street when there's rain or snow melt. When the sewer system is at full capacity, a diluted mixture of rainwater and sewage can be discharged into the local waterway. In this case, it would be Gowanus Canal, and that is what is called a combined sewer overflow. CSO retention facilities, like the one we intend to construct here at the Owl's Head CSO tank site, they collect and store that combined sewer overflow during that wet weather event until it can be pumped back to the wastewater treatment plant. And the major components of a CSO facility can be seen here in this profile view. Most of the tank is below ground. So there are large holding cells below ground. And then there's an above ground head house, which contains all the electro mechanical equipment like screens and pumps and that sort of thing, and control equipment. We will also have odor control and screens. Next slide, please. So on to project goals, obviously we need to satisfy the EPA mandate to reduce combined sewer overflow discharges to the canal, but we also need to design a resilient and sustainable facility that's going to be here for quite a long time, provide a welcoming and valued community asset, and also meet land use points of agreement, which is basically design of the open space, which is informed by public engagement and evaluation of water access. We have heard from many folks, through these public meetings that embedding a sense of environmental stewardship and education into the project is certainly a priority, and we'll be working to ensure the project meets that goal as well. Next slide, please. So just want to quickly review what's there today. Those of you who are familiar, know that it's been home to the Department of Sanitation's salt lot for a couple of years now. In addition, Big Reuse operates a composting operation for DSNY there. And the Gowanus Canal Conservancy was previously on site doing some ecological stewardship and programming. And then just south of 5th Street, there are a number of manufacturing and industrial businesses there. In the future, we will be constructing the CSO facility, but we will also be maintaining DSNY's salt storage and plow storage operations, the composting facility, along with the Gowanus Canal Conservancy, as well as a public waterfront and ecological design. Next slide, please. So just quickly to talk a little bit about the project design phasing. So we have submitted the salt lot facility design to EPA back in May 2022, and the final design was approved by PDC back in August. We are completing the design for the CSO facility. There are actually 2 phases to that, CP2 and CP3, but they need to be submitted to EPA for review in August of next year. And then the last piece is design of the public realm and the Big Reuse facility. And that design will follow the CSO facility review by EPA. Next slide, please. And then on to the project schedule. We do have a very ambitious project schedule to meet the EPA mandated milestones. This is the 3rd in a series of public engagement meetings, and the feedback has been critical as the design takes shape. The next scheduled engagement meeting will be in early 2023 to share the design developments and continue this conversation. We do plan to begin construction on the first construction package, what we call CP1, in roughly spring of 2023. And as that's moving along, we will have a dedicated community liaison on hand to be the direct contact for the community. I did also want to mention, you may have noticed that there is some ongoing construction out there right now, and that's for the construction of a new bulkhead along the north side of that site. That bulkhead construction will be wrapping up around March or April of next year, right in time for the first phase of the CSO tank construction to begin. And then construction is scheduled to be complete before 2030. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin Keating from Seldorf Architects to walk through the architectural design for the facility.
Thank you, Kevin. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Keating. I'm a partner at Seldorf Architects. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here with you this evening. Please allow me just a little of your time to walk you around the site and introduce you to our conceptual designs for the Owl's Head CSO. So first, let me just orient you to the Gowanus Canal. As Kevin mentioned, this is phase 2 of a 2-phase project. The first phase was for a CSO facility at the head end site. As he mentioned, we presented this to the community and to the PDC in 2018. And in 2019, we were happily awarded a Design Excellence Award. The facility is currently in construction, but today we are here to talk about the Owl's Head site. Our site is located down where my cursor is. If you can see my cursor, it's at the bend of the canal. We are in the South Brooklyn Industrial Business Zone. We're just going to slightly reorient the plan here and zoom in a bit. As I mentioned, we're at the bend of the canal. It's a peninsula. We are surrounded by 1,700 linear feet of waterfront. It's a 5-acre site. A couple of key things to note here. Again, we're in the South Brooklyn Industrial Business Zone. This zone was created to incorporate zoning and manufacturing and keep them within the confines of the city and sort of further help propel their growth. We're at the northern end of this IBZ zone. And as many of you may be familiar with, this zone can be viewed from the F train viaduct, which crosses south of our site as you come out of the Carroll Street station and may make your way back into 7th Avenue. This next slide here is actually a slide from the Smith and 9th Street station. It's actually the highest elevated station in all of New York City. There's a great vantage view. There's a great view of the site from this particular location. You could see here, we've highlighted that our site, the LSED site. Here you could see basically the overall makeup of the IBZ zone. There's a pretty monochromatic palette to it, very industrious, low-lying buildings. Next image here is also an image from the F train viaduct. The G train also goes along this route. This is of the LSED site. You're in the foreground is the tip of the peninsula. Where my cursor is, this is the 6th Street turning basin. And the canal sort of follows my cursor as it makes its way towards the Whole Foods and Whole Foods Esplanade. And then it makes its way page left, which is up north. This is a view from the Esplanade that I just mentioned. On page left is the LSED site as it currently is. There's the existing salt shed that was mentioned. In the background there, looking west, you could actually see the F train viaduct. And to page left, there is the Smith Street station. Okay, so I just want to walk you through what is currently on site. 2nd Avenue is located where my cursor is. To the page right, there's a new DOC facility. Not really new, but it's there. There's also a key point here we want to mention. There's a DOT parking facility, which we have to maintain accessibility to it. Moving across the page, there's an existing DEP pump station, which is below grade currently. We are looking to incorporate that into the new facility once it's built. There's the DSMY salt shed and salt lot. This is part of the phase 1 approach that we are taking to move that facility south, south of 5th Street. Adjacent to that is Big Reuse Composting and their operations. They're in partnership with the Gowanus Canal Conservancy. 5th Street bisects the site. 5th Street as part of this project will be demapped and turned into an access drive. Just where my cursor is the 6th Street turning basin. What's adjacent to that is a series of industrial and manufacturing buildings and businesses that DEP is working with to relocate. And at the tip of the peninsula is the parking facility for buses. All along both the parking facility and all along 6th Street is currently inaccessible to the public. We are certainly hoping to change that. So this is just a really simple diagram of the major components, the major infrastructural components that we have to build here. It starts with the CSO facility. This will be located at the northern end of the site above the access drive, which is formerly 5th Street. The salt lot will be built just south of that. It's already moving forward and received approval from the city. And to the left, we are working with all the stakeholders involved, but we will be positioning the composting facility along with program space for the Gowanus Canal Conservancy. Just to quickly remind you, this is the salt shed that we presented to the PDC back in August of 2022. This is its temporary configuration. The foreground of this image will change once it moves to its permanent condition, or the foreground, the composting element that you see there to page left will actually be moved westward on the peninsula. This image here actually shows what that salt shed would look like in its permanent form. Now, we're here to talk about the CSO facility for the LSED site and our conceptual approach to its design. So we'll just start below grade. As we all know, this is an extremely large storage tank. We need to position the building adjacent to 2nd Avenue. That's where the CSO line is currently. And it currently discharges into the Gowanus Canal at the outfall point, which we're looking to cap and seal. And instead, we're looking to divert that water into the facility. The positioning of these tanks obviously have sort of ramifications above grade, but you could see that the tank would come into this zone here, if you could see my cursor, and that's where the screening aspect of this project would take place. And then it would subsequently fill up these parallel tanks. There's a quick diagram just to note the elevational differences and levels that we are trying to achieve. We're raising this entire facility and all its critical equipment above the design flood elevation. Not only the 100-year flood elevation, but we're raising it even higher than that. So plus 14 feet will be that elevation that we're targeting. The current elevation at 2nd Avenue and what was 5th Street, the access alley, is plus 7 feet. So there's a difference there, which we have to mitigate. A couple of these arrows here are just indicative of vehicular traffic. Now, please note that most of this vehicular traffic will be just seasonal or sporadic at times, and really not as frequent as it might come across. Okay, so let me just quickly walk you into the building. Let us keep in mind that this is a machine, and it's an unmanned facility. It really is just one gigantic machine here to store water and to filter that water accordingly. Some key components that you'll see here. This is the CSO pipe in 2nd Avenue. Water during a heavy rainstorm will pass through what we call the main screening room. That's the largest volume in the project. This vertical element where my cursor is, that's a series of vertical screens that is literally pulling any debris that might have infiltrated into our water system before it is then put down into the tanks. In that, where my cursor is here at a mezzanine level, in that also large space, are the degridders. They're there to remove any sludge that may be in the water itself before the water is then discharged back into the system and down to the outside water treatment facility. As part of this project, we have to filter and purify any air that is within the building. We have large fans that are located at the 2nd floor level. These fans pull any air from that facility and pump it into odor control vessels. These are massive carbon filters that literally purify and scrub the air before anything is let out into the stack. A couple of key things. There will be access requirements over the top of tank where maintenance will be needed to access the tank below grade. And we'll do our best to sort of mediate those needs and requirements. But one key element here to remember is that there's an aggressive service condition that happens in this environment. It's extremely corrosive in many ways, and we need to be as durable as possible when specifies material. So we are working heavily with the engineering group. There's a large group of engineers, great engineers that are working with us to achieve Envision Gold, or sustainability goals for the project. Obviously, it starts with remediating the brownfield that we are in. In addition to that, we are stopping 4 million gallons of sewage entering our waterways. On top of that, we are doing our best to set up bioretention zones to manage any site runoff in and around the site. As I mentioned before, all sensitive equipment will be raised further than the 100-year floodplain. We will, with our engineers, be providing high efficiency equipment. This energy conservation measure will reduce the operational energy by 50%. And in response to the further response to from the community in providing green roofs and mitigating any of that heat island effect, we are introducing that to all levels of the project, both at the secondary volumes and the primary volumes. And lastly, all material will be sustainably procured. We'll try to use as much recycled content in the material as possible. So this is a quick plan of the facility. As I mentioned, this is the inlet. You can see where my cursor is into the facility. This main room here is the screening room. This is where all the water that enters into the facility passes through. All that physical debris is removed and transferred into a dumpster located where my cursor is. This is double height space in many cases where we have bridge cranes that are used to access and maintain this equipment. The secondary sort of volumes house all the equipment, the electrical equipment, instrumentation, and pump station equipment that's needed to help facilitate this process. Tertiary areas will be the yard, and in that yard we have the odor control vessels, which we'll show you shortly. Second floor here is that primary volume that raises up. The secondary volumes, as you can see here, we're trying to cover with as much green roof as possible. And this is a view of the facility from above, looking down. We are trying to provide as much green roof to mitigate the heat island effect and manage water as best we can. So I just want to pull out, now that you know how the CSO facility works, I just want to pull out a bit. And in this image, show you this image along with the following images. You can see the elements that have created this sort of vernacular of the environment that we are in. These anonymous industrial buildings are a large part of the essence of Gowanus. I just want to walk you through some of this that really sort of has helped to inspire us based on your feedback about making this building as industrious and true to its form and true to its industrial nature as possible. This is actually an image from the site. Looking across, there's a cement factory there. But in addition to that, and kind of, the key focus of this is these tubular timber piles. There's an early form of bulkheading along the canal, eventually transitioned into timber lagging, and then eventually into concrete lagging that formed the bulkhead. This is a view of that facility directly across from us that is still there. As many of you know, there was many of these sort of facilities up and down the Gowanus Canal over the decades. So here is an image that many of you may be nostalgic about. We certainly are. It really captures the essence and the spirit of what we think Gowanus was and what we hope to kind of keep as the spirit of Gowanus. It really has this striking balance between natural systems and industry. You kind of see that especially on page right here. Believe it or not, this is actually a view looking towards our site. This is where the current DSMY salt shed is. Behind that, they had built the current DOC facility, but behind that were the Burns Brothers industrial coal pockets. And you can kind of see how this sort of typology was basically ubiquitous up and down the canal. If many of you are familiar with the Gowanus Canal over the last decades, which I'm sure you have been and are. But it's this formwork, it's these shapes, it's this geometry that we're really inspired to kind of pursue and investigate. And obviously you all know, I assume you all know, the Red Hook grain terminal. This building is still existing. You could see this beauty in the sort of industrial sculpture of the building. This beautiful ripple effect that's created by this really industrious form. You get that sort of sense of what the canal really has and what the canal is really about. Again, that striking balance between nature and industry. It's with these forms and with that imagery that I showed you that we have basically positioned ourselves to look at this and to try to figure out, how do we pull this essence into the building. So on page left here, we have started to investigate and analyze how we could actually use the structure of the building, the concrete structure of the building, to form the facade of the building without having to apply an additional skin. The use of concrete is structurally important. It's there, it's being used in order to meet the requirements of this critical infrastructure, but it also remains true to its utilitarian form and nature. It is a sustainable choice in this position in that it forms both the structure of the facility as well as the architectural facade. There's no double skin to this facility. This will eliminate the need for additional building envelope, which would require a large amount of building material. So here what we're trying to do is really carve away. We have clay models that we've done in the office itself to try to see what form and what dimension of form would be best for a pedestrian that may be up close to this building. The second image is an image where it kind of go back to that sort of duality between the sort of natural systems and industry. And this fourth image here of this formwork, which kind of the blending of the two is what we hope to use as the base of the building, what we call the plinth of the building, in that we have to raise the majority of the structure up to meet that 14 plus foot elevation. So this is just a quick snapshot of the sort of refined yet simple array of materials we're planning for the building. It will be cast in place concrete, formed in the exterior as noted. There'll be stainless steel for any of the entry points into the building. Again, very corrosive resistant. In addition to that, this main element here, this glass element, will be curved glass, fluted glass that will take on the same formwork and vernacular that the building skin has. And I'll show you, we've done a full-scale mock-up of that formwork and that shape that we're trying to achieve on the building facade. Here we've sort of arrived at a dimension, a width dimension of 26 feet. In this particular case, people will be getting up close to the building, and we feel it's very pedestrian friendly at this scale. And right now, this next image, I'll bring you right into the proposal. This is the image of the building as we are proposing. Here you can see how that sort of fluting and concave formwork creates a harmonic facade along the edge. The canal, just to orient you, is to page right where my cursor is. You're at the northeast corner of the project. This is the tallest volume of the project itself. This is the primary screening room. And as I mentioned, this fluted glass, this curved glass takes on the same formwork, where during the day, it'll be nice and reflective. and at night be luminous. There's the plinth, as I mentioned. The plinth will take on a different form and have more of a sort of natural sort of imprintation. That is that plinth that is raising us up to the 14-foot design flood elevation. Now, let me just quickly walk you around the building. This is a view on the north side of the building. We were at the northeast corner there. You can see the large aperture of curved glass that we will be inserting into the primary screening room. You could see the sort of tubular formwork and how it sort of caters to the sort of reflectivity and the sort of industrial vernacular that we were just talking about. On page right, you could see the green ductwork and odor control vessels. This is something we wanted to showcase and celebrate and rather than hide and conceal. Again, further emphasizing the industrial sort of past history of Gowanus and what a lot of people have told us they'd like to keep. This next image here is a view of the east elevation. I'll quickly just jump to the rendering, which also shows that east elevation. This is now at the corner of 2nd Avenue and the access alley. You can see that plinth in the foreground, raising our facility up to the design flood elevation. You could see here the fluting and concave formwork that creates the facade. The large apertures are into the main primary spaces. So you get an aperture here in the primary screening room. This second aperture here is into that degritter area. And that third aperture at this location is into the fan room. In order to balance out the verticality of the building, we've introduced these, in essence, heavy cornice lines along with the canopy at this lower level. This kind of has a little dialogue between verticality and horizontality. This is a view of the building from the access alley. You can see these large vertical apertures that will be beautiful in its reflectivity. And last elevation is a view of the west side of the facility. You can see the odor control vessels as they are positioned and the volumes of the secondary volumes in the foreground and the primary volumes in the background. And this is a view of the facility in the IVZ zone in its position directly across from the Whole Foods Esplanade. There in the background, you kind of see the F-train viaduct peeking its way by. And again, something we're trying to achieve, which is that striking balance between a natural system and industrial projects like this. And with that, I will hand it over to Alicia West. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. So we have a little time for questions and discussion before we turn it over to Scape to provide some updates on the design process for the open space and do a little more fun polling. So I guess I will just encourage folks to raise their little Zoom hand. You can, let's see, where do we find that? At the bottom in reactions, there's a little smiley face with a plus on his forehead. I'll put my hand up. Wait, can I not put it? There we go. Raise hand. So it'll look like that. And I'll kind of scroll through and try to call on you as we go. Don't be shy. And we can jump back through the presentation slides. Let's see.
Hey, Alicia, it's Glenn Kelly here. I'm not
Hi,
sure
Glenn.
if you can hear me.
I can.
Yeah, I'm not. Would you go over that again? Because I'm not seeing a raise hand function here.
Okay, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's something that says reactions, and it should have a smiley face and a little plus on its forehead.
There you
And
go.
when you click on that, at the bottom, it says raise hand. You can do lots of other fun emojis too, if you're in the mood. All right, you got it, Glenn.
I'll keep it simple.
Glenn, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, please. We might get to this later, but I think a lot of people are hoping for a more natural bulkhead with all the sheet piling that's gone in. The canal is looking very sort of uninviting, very sterile. This location offers us a chance to do that, and I'm hoping that there'll be some way to incorporate a more natural riprap, plantings, whatever, that wouldn't be accessible to the public, but might promote inclusion of wildlife. And
Yeah.
then the other thing is, I'm just wondering, I like the design, by the way,
Thank you.
particularly like the cornice and the canopy, the glass. I started seeing that concrete, and my first thought was like, gee, how are they going to deal with the graffiti? So, um, you know, there's no getting around it. I'm sure that it's going to invite graffiti. So some kind of coating maybe to facilitate removal.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's
Okay.
definitely on our checklist. And just to speak to the natural edge piece, we'll talk a little bit about that when Scape takes over the presentation. But I just, that's absolutely something that we've heard over and over again from the community during these public engagement meetings. It's been really helpful design direction for us. And that is definitely what we're looking to achieve in some interesting places around the peninsula, not everywhere, but in some important spots. Thank you, Glenn.
Okay, thank you.
Triada, I'm not
Hi,
mispronouncing your
can
name.
you hear me?
I can
Hello.
hear you. Hi.
Hi. I also like the design. I am seeing that you are responding to the environment, and there's several aspects I like. So I'm going to start with that. But I would like to know more the performance of the facility in extreme weather events. And when you said the word 100-year flood, because we're having more and more floods closer together, I was wondering why not use a larger number, like 1,000-year flood or something.
Yeah, I could talk to that. I mentioned the 100-year floodplain, and I mentioned
Sorry, Kevin Keating. We have two Kevins.
Oh, right.
Kevin Clark, do you want to speak to the general question, and then maybe Kevin Keating can speak to the architectural design?
Absolutely. So Kevin Keating had talked about the design flood elevation. That just means the elevation at which the critical components of the facility are located, so that if there was an extreme flood there, that equipment wouldn't be damaged. So it's literally things like locating electrical equipment and that sort of thing above that elevation. As far as the performance is concerned, in the facility, CSO facilities like these they're not necessarily designed to treat and store CSO volumes that would be produced during, a very extreme wet weather event like we've mentioned there, 100-year or 1,000-year or 10,000-year storm. They're simply not designed for that. However, the CSO facility should still function as long as there's still power there. And we still provide the ability to bypass the facility, and which means that combined sewage that's produced during that wet weather event would bypass the facility and discharge to Gowanus Canal directly to relieve the sewer system. I'm not sure if that completely answers your question. It should. I guess the point is it would not contribute to flooding. It wouldn't make the flooding condition any worse. In fact, the hydraulics should make it a little bit better. But in an extreme event, a very extreme event, there's not a lot that the CSO facility is going to help with.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Kevin. I see Diana has her hand up. And if you have already put your hand up and you asked your question, if you could try to put your hand down, unless you have another question, in which case, please keep it up. Go ahead, Diana.
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you, yes.
Wonderful. So I like the design for the building and the historical references. And I was just curious about the green roof and the bioretention areas. And I couldn't tell from the drawings if those areas are accessible to the public at all. And if you could, I don't know if that's going to also be in Scape's presentation, but would love to learn a little bit more about those two aspects of the design.
Sure. Yeah. The green roofs on top of the facility will not be accessible to the public, but the bioretention in and around the facility, as Scape will go into, will be.
Thanks, Kevin. Oh, Glenn put his hand down. Oh, David, I'm glad you could join us. So David wrote in the chat, nice job on the site planning and consolidating the entry access. I also very much like the reference to the historic infrastructure in the proposed design. Great, thank you, David. All right, does anyone else have any other questions? Because we can keep going with the presentation. We have a a lot of content to get through, but we just wanted to make sure everyone had an opportunity to ask their questions and chime in, give us your feedback. I'm going to stare awkwardly at the screen for another like 15 seconds until someone puts their hand up. And if not, we'll keep going. All right. Thank you for everyone in the chat. That's great. Okay, so Jessica, do you want to share your screen? And we'll turn it over to Gina Worth and Anna Holkalter from Scape. And again, for those of you who may have joined late, I just want to reiterate that we are continuing to work through coordination with our stakeholders, our agency partners, and the EPA on the public realm design. And as Scape is going to explain, we've been focusing primarily on the CSO facility design because of the aggressive schedule set for us by the EPA. And we'll have more to share out in the coming months. But that said, this team has really been working in lockstep with the goal of achieving, that balance between the natural systems and the industrial facilities that's so emblematic of Gowanus. And we've heard from so many of you over the past 2 meetings that that's what you'd like us to capture here. And so I just want to reassure everyone that while we might not have as much detail as you might have been hoping to see tonight, we will be back and more to come, and everybody is working closely together. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Gina. You're starting, right?
Great. Yes. Thanks, Alicia.
Thank you. Take it away.
Okay. So I'm Gina Worth. I'm the design principal and a partner at Scape Landscape Architecture and have the pleasure of working with this very talented team on the public realm. So I first wanted to say thanks to everyone this evening for coming out and sharing your thoughts. The meetings that we've had so far have been enormously helpful in shaping the public realm, and we appreciate you devoting your evening to this topic. So you can move to the next slide. I'll talk a little bit about our design process, and Anna will get into some of our more recent design updates and some of our polling questions for all of you. And then we'll open it up for Q&A, just like we did with the building. So just as a reminder, we have a very substantial amount of public realm that's being incorporated into this project. We have the zone that's the Canal waterfront, which includes the 2nd Avenue street end, the Esplanade area that wraps the CSO facility, and the area that moves to the west. We also have what we're calling the point, which is shown here in blue, which is about 0.73 acres. And this is this very interesting peninsula that sticks out into the canal at the intersection of the canal and the 6th Street turning basin. A member of the public would then be able to wrap around to the east, the area that we're calling the basin, which is 0.48 acres, and connects back to 2nd Avenue and would be a primary point of interface between the water, the community, and the CSO facility, as well as the other programs on the site, like the salt storage shed, GCC, big reuse, et cetera. And so it's a very substantial amount of public space. If you've attended our meetings before, you've seen this diagram, but it sounds like from our poll, there's 30% of people approximately who are here for the first time tonight. So just sharing a little bit of that context. Next slide. And we have been extremely appreciative of many of you and many of your fellow community members and stakeholders coming out to share community input on the design process. When we first came to you at our first meeting in February, we had approximately 140 attendees. You can see the diagram that we presented on the left, simply showing the area that was public realm and getting a lot of different ideas about the quality and the character. And Glenn, I'm really glad you brought up the comment around the naturalized bulkhead, because we've tried to find opportunities for that within this project that align with the infrastructure and industrial needs of the site. In our second community meeting in May, we had about 45 attendees, and we dug into different programmatic concepts more and learned about like specifics of how certain spaces might be able to feel what other programs could happen here that we weren't considering. And we're trying very hard now to work with the agency stakeholders to incorporate more of those ideas into the design. Next slide. And so at our first public meeting, I'm not going to read all of the points here, but happy to return to this slide during the discussion if there's specific questions. I think we've talked a little bit, and Kevin's, I think, really nicely shared some of the updates on the building that respond to community feedback. But from the perspective of the waterfront, we definitely heard loud and clear a desire for an ecologically responsive and natural shoreline where possible that can support different wildlife habitats, as well as a variety of edge conditions, the importance of water access, and the importance of improved circulation across the site, meeting many different levels of accessibility and being fully accessible to all users. We also heard a need for different community programs and amenities, specifically outdoor education, gathering, and performance, as well as opportunities to integrate kind of more creative practices. Next slide. This drove the development of our different goals for the project, which a primary goal of the project obviously is to provide site safety in a mixed use infrastructure area. We can't forget that while this is public space, this is also, as Kevin called it, an active machine. We do want to improve site resilience and really work with some of those future flooding constraints and both protect certain areas from higher level floods, but also be resilient to floods when they do happen. We want to provide public access to and along the waterfront, support ecological functions and environmental stewardship, and celebrate the neighborhood's cultural and historic character. Next slide. At our second community meeting, we presented a variety of programs, including canal walkways, native planting, green infrastructure, plazas, flexible gathering space, tidal wetlands, and direct waterfront access. And just to go back to the kind of concept of the naturalized edges, that peninsula, that point where it says tidal wetland on the far left of the slide is really where we're trying to maximize the potential of that. And we've been in the process of coordinating with different agency stakeholders to really make that vision a reality. So in our next meeting, I think we'll have more updates there, but as many of you know, stakeholder and agency coordination takes a little while, so it's still in progress. Next slide. And this was the more adapted plan that was also shown at the second community meeting, highlighting many of those same features. It included various ecological habitats and meaningful places to engage in education, stewardship, and community, while also balancing the important needs of the CSO facility. So just to call out a couple of them, the Canal Plaza at the north side of the intersection of 2nd Avenue, potentially a gathering space and educational space open to the public, a walkway that wraps around the perimeter, performance space, bioretention space that Kevin noted earlier, gathering space, outdoor classroom, tidal wetland space, and kayak launch and or boat access at the at the intersection of 2nd Avenue and 6th Street. Next slide. We heard a ton of great feedback, so we've made this diagram to represent some of that feedback. Again, I'm not going to get into all of it this evening, but there was definitely expressed a need for gathering spaces with different scales and views of the canal, a desire for green infrastructure and sustainable practices, site safety and access to the water being a major priority, not just at 6th Street, but other locations around the site, and also the importance of coordination with the dredgers and the GCC. So we've really taken this to heart. Next slide. And we have been meeting with many agencies that actually regulate and, in some ways do control what happens in some of these kind of intersection moments, and stakeholders, as well as community groups, including the dredgers and the GCC. So we met with the Gowanus Canal Conservancy to understand their program and layout needs. We've met with the Parks Department multiple times, as you can see in this list, sharing some of the initial ideas that we had, but also some of the community concepts that had come forward, reviewing them particularly with an eye towards accessibility. We've met with the Parks Department Waterfront Division. We had a great conversation with the dredgers around water access preferences at that 6th Street turning basin. We've also met with Big Reuse and, as Kevin noted, met with the Public Design Commission and are continuing to coordinate with the Department of Sanitation. So there's many partners overlapping within this space. A very important one has also been thinking about how it's complying with some of the EPA regulations and bulkhead conditions. So much of that is still in progress, and we look forward in our next meeting to share more of those agency updates with you. Next slide. And just a reminder, while the site lies outside of the waterfront zoning, there's a desire for the landscape to feel connected and part of the greater public realm that will be emerging along the Gowanus over time. And so we are using some of the standards that have been put forward within the Gowanus rezoning waterfront access plan for this site. So we feel continuous and part of that greater public realm language. And I think with that, I'll pass it to Anna to talk about the progress so far, focusing on the area immediate environs around the CSO facility.
Thanks, Gina. I'm Anna Hochhalter, a landscape architect with Escape. And as Gina mentioned, I'll be talking through the public realm design updates, and we'll end with an interactive poll with a number of questions that we'll use to help us continue progressing the design. As others have mentioned in the presentation, the project is a complex one with multiple design phasing schedules, and that allows the project to follow the EPA deadline schedule. So our design focus today is on the public realm adjacent to the CSO facility, roughly shown here in the image. So we are working holistically across the whole site to design the public waterfront, and we'll share an updated design on those areas in a future meeting. Next. So the area surrounding the CSO facility has many operational needs. The team has worked very closely to design a meaningful public waterfront in a way that does not hinder the important operations and maintenance that have to happen at these facilities. And so this really means we cannot have any fixed elements outside of, it means that we need to keep fixed elements outside of maintenance vehicle pathways. There cannot be any fixed objects within the vehicle pathways needed to maintain and operate these facilities. You can see where those movements need to occur on top of the Canal Plaza and the top of tank. So the public realm seeks to reintroduce some of the natural hydrologic functions and ecological performance of the site's former tidal marsh, while also celebrating the neighborhood's unique qualities and bringing the community to the water. Looking at these in-progress concepts on screen, the primary pedestrian access to the waterfront begins at the end of 2nd Avenue at what we call the Canal Plaza. So now I'm going to walk us kind of through the plan. So we're all on the same page about the programming in these different zones. Starting at the Canal Plaza at the end of 2nd Avenue, this is an open, flexible space that has integrated seating along the edges with lush marsh planting, maritime planting at the face of the CSO facility. This is next to the 2nd Avenue street end. And at the street end, we heard many comments about access to the water and views up the canal. And as has been mentioned, we're still studying the design of the opportunities in that area at 2nd Avenue street end. So we don't have an update for you today. There's a lot more coordination that's required with the EPA and DEP to determine what's feasible there. So continue moving along the site. We walk through the Canal Plaza to the Canal Walkway, which is at the canal's edge. It has the opportunity for more seating as well as native planting designed to absorb rainwater runoff and increase biodiversity. On the far left side of the screen, you can see where the walkway expands into an amphitheater with ADA access, and public realm ramps up to a higher elevation where the CSO facility is, labeled the top of tank. So at the top of the subsurface tank, there are also many operational needs, and those have influenced the design you're seeing here. We believe that we can integrate the top of the tank into the public realm, but there will be more limitations on the amenities because of the various access needs for DEP's operations. So this is something that the community asked us to look into, and we believe that it can be a shared space on the top of the tank. The last area shown is the access drive, which is the operational driveway used by DSNY, DEP, Big Reuse, and GCC. So the pedestrian access is focused on the western end, page left, where the intensity of the operations is lower. We're designing pavement markings and material changes to help signal that this is a shared street condition and create a safe accessible space for operations as well. Next slide. So next we have a series of illustrations that show how these programs are coming together in our in-progress design. We're cognizant of our site's position along the Gowanus Canal and are designing with that context in mind. As Gina mentioned, we're using the Gowanus guardrail as well as the light pole. Here, the Gowanus guardrail helps to signal again that this is a public waterfront in the spirit of the Waterfront Access Plan guidelines. You can see some of the elevation changes between the top of the tank and the canal walkway that Kevin mentioned, and we're incorporating those grade changes into design elements such as the amphitheater. We're designing various infrastructure, green infrastructure systems such as bioretention, pervious paving. We're seeking to improve biodiversity with a native maritime planting palette. And this area along the walkway is fairly constrained. We heard from previous meetings, there's a desire for more meandering pathways, and there is an opportunity for that type of experience in other locations in other parts of the site, such as the point, which we'll share at a future time. But this area is quite constrained with all of the infrastructure needed for the CSO facility. Next slide. So I'll talk through the canal walkway concept. These are all in progress concepts, but here we're celebrating the Gowanus industrial character with details such as a cobblestone banding, cool toned pavement, the boldness of the Gowanus guardrail in the context with a rich planting palette. The views from this location are tiered, first from the walkway along the canal edge, but also from the top of the tank, where you'll be able to view across the canal under canopy trees and lower shrub layers. The design will use hardy salt-tolerant plants with an educational quality that align with the goal to make the stormwater management visible and celebrated on site. The walkway concept has areas for seating and potentially for interpretive signage. We heard from previous meetings that interpretive elements are important, and so this is a potential area where those elements could be incorporated. Next. Another area where we could potentially incorporate interpretive elements is at the Canal Plaza at the CSO facility. You saw a more detailed design rendering from Kevin earlier. In this illustration, we're focusing on the more of the public realm concept. So in this location, the operational needs are very significant. The below grade tide gates require maintenance and routine checks after every major storm event. And so we're designing a simple decorative paving pattern inspired by Tidal Creek ecology, such as a mudflat ripple, using warm color tones to contrast the cool concrete forms of the building and the surrounding industrial context. This can provide more of a visual interest and help break up the space here. In the background of this image, you can see stacked stone retaining walls outside of the operational areas that provide seating and bring a naturalistic character, materiality to the plaza. We see this as an entrance to the canal walkway. And so one of our poll questions will be asking about feedback on the types of themes we should incorporate for interpretive design. So keep this location in mind when we get to that poll. Next, please. This is our last illustration. This is showing the area on top of the below grade CSO facility tank. And we do believe that we can incorporate this into the public realm, but there will be more limitations on the amenities here because of the various DEP and Con Ed access and operational needs. So we're looking to incorporate pervious pavers here to provide more stormwater retention on site, as well as bioretention in the planted areas shown to improve water quality. We're designing a similar canal-inspired paving pattern in coordination with various access hatches to those below grade facility structures. The public programming here would need to be temporary and flexible in nature and open during times when DEP or Con Ed are not performing maintenance activities. Next slide. So we'll zoom out now to see this part of the site holistically. You can see a sense of the overall site design. You can see the scale relationships between the CSO facility, the Canal Plaza, the walkway, the amphitheater, wrapping up to the top of the tank. And these designs are all still being developed, and we're refining the materiality and the planting, coordinating with many infrastructure and operational requirements on site, and really trying to design a waterfront that encourages meaningful interactions, both with the community and with the canal itself. Next slide. So in our next portion of the meeting, we're going to focus on more of the look and feel of the public realm. And we really want to hear from you about the materiality and what really inspires you about Gowanus. So we're digging deeper into the design detail development. So for example, we're developing a planting design and palette, and we've heard a community desire to prioritize native ecosystems. We translated that input into these 4 planting design goals. So we seek to reconnect with the historic ecosystem, to enhance the wildness of Gowanus, to restore native habitat, and to reflect the Gowanus character. Next. For the look and feel of the design features, again, getting into the paving and the materiality of the walls and various steps and detailing, we are seeking to reflect the urban Gowanus character. This is something that we heard from previous meetings. So some of the things that inspire us about the Gowanus character are the adjacent industrial uses, the steel bulkheads, concrete blocks, interwoven stone vegetation. There's a lot of brightly colored metal containers, super bold, super graphics that are bold, naturalized shorelines, and of course pop-up programming. So in our next slide is an interactive poll where we'd really like to hear your thoughts on what reflecting the Gowanus character means to you. So you will need to put a website into your browser. That website again is, it's also in the chat, so you can see it in the chat. It's https mentmeter.com. You can see it on screen here too. So go to the website on screen, mentimeter.com, and you'll be prompted to put a code in. And the code is here, 6536175.
And that's going to be the code for every poll, correct, team? Okay.
Yeah.
We have tested this many times. It should work, but if anyone is having technical difficulties, please let us know in the chat. And as people enter things in, it should display on this screen, so you'll be able to see it.
So, yep, once you see this screen, please submit your answers and we'll see them pop up. If it's not working for you, we do have the Q&A session later in the meeting, so we can talk more about these questions then as well. It'll take about 1 to 2 minutes. And also feel free to use your own words. You don't need to pick from this list.
And you can put in multiple answers too, right, team?
Right.
Just don't write a dissertation. Anything is possible aesthetic. Low rise, big sky. Oh, well, is that you, Peter Reich?
Now it's me, Glenn.
Glenn. Oh, the oh wells. I can just hear Peter saying that.
This is great.
Awesome.
Hey, well, Alicia, while we're waiting, I just want to ask about future steps. You brought the design for the head of Canal facility to the CB6 Parks Committee.
Absolutely.
Is that the plan here
Yeah.
as well?
So as you remember, we also brought the salt shed through, I think in July. So yeah, the CSO facility, we want to get it a little bit further along in design, but I think we're planning to come to community board early next year. So
Yeah.
I've reached out to
so-
Mike to let him know. He's
Good.
giving me a heads up.
And I will encourage the board to include other committees because, you know, we have a waterfront development committee, we have a land use committee, and our parks and environmental protection is certainly the right committee to come to with all of this. But we're a small committee, and there are so many people who are interested in this. So we'll try to expand that.
Absolutely. I think last time for the salt shed, we did a joint, you guys did a joint land use and parks and environmental committee for us, which was great.
Okay.
So we'll look to do that again. Thank you, Glenn. All right, we're getting awesome responses here. Has everybody had an opportunity? This is so helpful.
I'm seeing so many amazing comments around the power of viewing from the water and the water experience, as well as the wildness of some of the planted habitat or spontaneous habitat.
Tugboats.
So we do have another poll question. People are ready
Right.
to move there.
Let's do it.
So you shouldn't have to re-log in or change the number. It should just show up on your screen. So we heard previously about the importance of interpreting the site to make visible the stormwater management, to make visible the importance of the work that the CSO facility is doing, and to help celebrate the Gowanus. So our question for you is, what types of themes would you like to be interpreted? Some ideas that we had were ecological interpretation, historical narrative, highlighting the canal hydrology and the tides, green infrastructure, wildlife, the facility performance. So the next question is, which themes would you like to see interpreted on site?
All of them. Nice.
There's a lot of suspense waiting for answers. It's nice to see how these comments, like many of them are about the content of interpretation, but a lot of them also are about how it weaves into the site, whether it's something walkable on the ground plane or something that's like a a series that you encounter at different moments along the site. Those are really great thoughts.
Thank you, everyone. We have a very rich palette of things to draw from, I think, on site. There's just a lot going on to help people understand about how the city works. Really cool.
Yeah, this is great.
And thank you to Rita, who put a note in the chat, having trouble with Mentimeter. So yes, please add your comments there. And thank you for mentioning the Lenape residents.
Yeah, thank you, Rita.
We will be tracking the chat as well.
Okay, we'll take another few moments before we go on to the next. Someone does not like interpretive signage. All right, noted. Public facility, public good, public use. Yeah. Okay, these are awesome. All right, in the interest of time, let's go to the next one, shall we?
One last poll question for you. Now that you've thought about the themes to interpret, where do you think it makes sense to do that type of interpretation? This is a map of the full site. So we focused mostly around the CSO facility, but we are open to hearing and welcome your feedback on where within the full site it makes sense to do this type of interpretation. I think with the amount of ideas that we just saw flash on our screen, we can't concentrate it and wouldn't want to concentrate it all in one spot. So let us know. You can use the numbers or the words.
Okay. This is so helpful. Anna, is that the last poll?
That's
Ooh,
right.
good long answer there. And Rita
Last
put something in
poll.
the chat too.
Yeah, it's nice to see the comments around the type of signage that makes sense in different places. Maybe some more immersive landscapes aren't overly interpretive. That's a very interesting idea.
All right, so I think we have about 10 more minutes on our Zoom. So I think we can open it up to some more general Q&A or discussion. We'll do it just like we did previously within the architecture section. Glenn's hand is up first. Take it away, Glenn.
Sure. There was some mention of the Second Avenue access. It sounds like that's being kicked down the road away. Can you talk any more about limits to that? I mean, we did ask for the possibility for the public to put a boat in there, which has been the case for many years. So it'd be nice to retain that. The bioretention area, I mean, the plans were showing like a grassy surface around some trees. It's going to be difficult to maintain, probably not going to be viable long run. I would encourage the use of just some, sort of crushed stone, packed earth. It is going to be more better able to absorb the rain than all of this paving. And like I say, at every park presentation, you're going to want to provide some way to allow the public to access electricity, even if it's locked up most of the time. But just in case somebody wants to have an event, that there's some way to do it, and you're not running an extension cord out of your facility. And this might be a good place to have some sort of little water feature, even if it's just a simple little sprinkler.
Great. So you can see, this is my favorite thing, the little sticky notes. So Jessica is typing away all of your comments so we can keep track of them.
Yeah, and I had made a comment on that last question regarding the natural bulkhead. When we got to the north side, it was all just steel sheet piling. And I was hoping, because there's a natural edge there now, that there'd be some way to retain some of that, even if it was installed outside of the sheet piling. I don't know if there are any limits on reducing the width of the canal, because it's being reduced elsewhere. But even if you had, 6 or 8 feet of some sort of natural habitat below that, that would allow sort of some interest to passersby to kind of look down, see ducks, other birds, anything else that might come along.
Awesome.
That's all.
Thank you so much, Glenn. I think we got all of that down. Diana, take it away.
Sorry to be the other only person talking. Yeah, just seconding what Glenn said about figuring out a way to have some habitat maybe on the outside of the bulkhead along the canal walkway. Maybe there could be some floating gardens. Figuring out how to do that would be amazing here, or attaching to the bulkhead, similar to some of the work that we're doing with the dredgers and the mussel habitat that we're trying to figure out. And I also just wanted to ask about seating areas. I know the design team mentioned it would be difficult to meander along the canal walkway, but I'm wondering if it's possible to have little seating nooks, and I did think I saw some seating near the canal plaza, but just wanted to ask about that.
Oh, Alicia, you're on mute.
Rookie mistake. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Diana. Yeah, the seating, seating is something that I think is super important. Just to be able to like pause when you're walking through a space is so valuable for so many reasons. And it's something that we're continuing to look at as the design progresses. But, in some of those sort of more rendering type 3D sketches, we did have areas to sit down, to rest. So you're not just kind of on this long linear walk space. I think, yeah, there you can see it there. Yeah. And we're really looking to maximize opportunity for people to, hang out.
Yeah, maybe also I can respond to just some of the comments about the naturalized shoreline in general. I think we've really focused on trying to create more of a true naturalization of the shoreline, or as true as possible in the Gowanus, with our many constraints out on the southern side of the point. And so we haven't provided a lot of detail or updates to that area. So if you came to the last meeting, that was identified. It's this area here, number 10, where we're trying to create a true tidal wetland pocket that is large and substantial, But that requires a lot of ongoing coordination with different agencies, including the EPA and our talented engineering team. And so it's kind of a longer development period. And I would say similar constraints exist at the street end, and a lot of those conversations are underway, but we just don't have updates on those spaces today because of the agency and stakeholder coordination within those different zones. As to the comments around, is it possible to do something outside of the bulkhead? I think with the permitting restrictions of the bulkhead design and the EPA and the not wanting to fill in additional pieces of the canal, I think those kinds of techniques would need probably to be a second phase or future kind of additive overlay. But I do know, Diana, like we've talked on other projects, so that might be possible in the future on many sites. So I think that, you know, around the canal, that opportunity exists elsewhere. And I don't see why that couldn't potentially like be brought up and discussed here. But I think our real focus as a design team is to think about, rather than small and incremental pieces of natural infrastructure, really trying to have a real substantial one at the point and focus on that as a really big win for like the wild and natural systems of the canal.
Thanks, Gina.
Alicia, there was a question about the 6th Street turning basin and whether it says, I noticed an earlier site map had the 6th Street basin reduced to about half its current length. I don't recall seeing anything like that. There was actually an old barge that's sitting in the canal, so that might have just you know, conveyed that maybe it had been reduced, but no, the intention is to maintain the existing street 6th Street turning basin footprint as is, other than you know, any reductions due to the construction of new bulkheads, which is very minimal.
Thanks, Kevin. Sorry, it's so hard to monitor the chat at the same time. Glenn's hand is up again. Glenn, take it away.
Yes, I'm back. Thank you, Rita, for suggesting having some way to extricate yourself from the canal should you find yourself falling in somehow.
Yeah, we've definitely heard
this
that.
This is something that was not brought up today and should be, that 2nd Avenue access point would be a perfect way to provide that, because it's visible from straight down the canal. So anybody who happened to fall in, you know, could see, oh, I can get out there. So, you know, that supports that idea, but, you know, anywhere that a ladder can be put in just in case, so that somebody is not, you know, looking up and down the canal and seeing no way to get out. And then thanks to Donna, who reminded us that, yeah, there's supposed to be some sort of a public restroom facility here. Is this going to be part of the next presentation then?
Yes, so we're just not there yet, and we will get there, and that's definitely among the feedback that was recorded, especially at the last meeting, request for public restrooms. And Donna, thank you for joining tonight, and to just get at the other part of your question. ADA accessibility is extremely important, and it's a priority as we approach the full design of this of the open space.
Thank you.
Yep. Diana writes, could interpretation elements bleed out onto the sidewalk and 2nd Avenue street end? Jessica, make sure you get that one. Certainly something we can consider. We'll go talk to our friends at DOT. Okay, so it is 8:30. We're getting to the end of our Zoom time, but I just want to give people another few moments to add any other feedback that you want us to hear. Parking in the street and might also need to be coordinated with them. Very funny, Diana. Noted.
Alicia, do we want to circle back to that one question we missed earlier about the water table?
Oh, yes.
So,
Please take that, Kevin. Thanks.
sure. So the question was, how does the water table factor into the elevation / siting of the storage tank? It doesn't really factor into the siting. The site is the site. As far as the elevation is concerned, the most important we had mentioned earlier is, protecting all of the electromechanical equipment from a potential flood. And so the first floor, the operating floor, will be located above that elevation. The most important issue associated with the water table is just the design of the supportive excavation, which will cut off the groundwater and allow us to construct the below ground portions of the tank. And would allow us to perform the excavation. So that is factored into the supportive excavation design. And then for the tank design itself, there's two things that need to be considered when that's when those concrete structures are designed. And first is the buoyant uplift force. So believe it or not, when the tank is empty, that groundwater is pushing the tank up. It's going to want to push the facility up. And so you got to, take a look at that, balance the weight of the concrete, potentially add some tie downs, and then also consider the weight of the tank when the tanks are full with water, to prevent some settling or differential settlement. So that's how that's really the only impact here. I hope that answers your question. And if not, please let me know and we can follow up.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Oh, good. You answered the question. Good. All right. So I just wanted to, before we say bye, I just wanted to quickly go over some next steps and how you can reach us. Jessica, can you pull that last slide up or just zoom in? There you go. So, I just want to start with saying just a tremendous thank you to all of you who took the time and to spend your Wednesday evening with us. Your feedback throughout this public engagement process has been invaluable. It has shaped the approach in a million different ways. And I think that you've seen that on display tonight in some of the designs that were put forth. So again, just thank you so very much. Our next public meeting is going to be scheduled in early 2023. More on that to come. And Glenn, as we discussed, will be coming to Community Board 6 with the head house early next year as well. If after we say goodbye tonight, you want to get in touch with us about this project, this is a designated email address for this project, which I monitor. So you can get us anytime at this email address. And then the recording of tonight's presentation and discussion will be on our YouTube channel as well after tonight. Glenn.
Yes, in advance of the Community Board 6 meeting, the presentation, would it be possible to get these presentations that you're giving us so they can be distributed to our committees? Bring them up to speed in case they have not attended any of these meetings. Just
yeah,
so
for sure. And I think our goal would be to kind of give a sort of a cohesive overview as a part of that presentation to give everybody the surrounding context, so they're not just looking at the building design in a vacuum.
Just want to make sure everybody's up to speed.
Yeah, absolutely, really important.
Thanks.
Okay, so I'm just taking a look at the chat to make sure I'm not missing anything. It's a pleasure being heard. I'm so glad to hear that. This is I just also want to thank our design team and the DEP team. This has been a tremendous effort with all of these meetings and this very large presentation and all of the design work that's gone into this. It's truly a pleasure to work with this design team. So thank you all. And thank you everyone for coming, and we'll hopefully see you next time. Take care, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.